he created something he didn't like?
Yeah, because he was perfect beforehand, right?
Who is he?
You're God.
You mean Jesus?
Oh, is Jesus the same as God, right?
No, not in my practice.
Okay, so is God God? Yahweh?
God is God, yes.
Okay,
Jesus
so
is.
Yahweh was perfect before he created anything.
Yeah.
Right. So when he decided to change that state of being from perfection to something else, he intentionally decided to create something that didn't go his way.
Well, we live out of free will, so
Yeah. Including all that. I'm not even holding it. It's fine. I'm including all of it. So with free will intact, he chose to create things that didn't go his way, right?
Perhaps, but is that something we should keep God for accountable? Or
yeah, because he was perfect beforehand. I'm just making sure I understand your position. He was perfect before he created anything, and then he created stuff that he doesn't like, right?
Depends on how you define that he created something that he did not like.
Okay, well, does he like it when people sin?
No, but that is not something you could scoop on, like blame God for it.
I'm not blaming God. I'm just trying to understand your position. I don't think God does anything. So God was perfect, and then he created people with free will and a sinful nature.
I think the sinful nature is in the nature.
Yeah. So he created people with a sinful nature, right?
Yeah, you could perhaps.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I did not. I don't think he created so that we would sin and do the.
Well, who decided to give people a sinful nature?
I think the sinful nature is not necessarily something that we should be doing, but something we choose to do.
Right, but who gave people this capability of having a sinful nature?
Well, would you consider?
Why are you asking me a question?
I'm asking you a question to make sense out of the debate.
Okay, well, I just want to answer that one. So, God created people with a sinful nature, right?
Mankind is without.
Yeah. So I am right. So God was perfect, and then he decided he wanted stuff that wasn't perfect, right?
Depends on how you use things.
Well, just the same way that you're using it when I asked you if he was perfect.
God himself, yeah, but we ourselves cannot, we're like each and every creation is guilty of sin.
Okay, yeah, so God created stuff that he doesn't like. Okay, I got it. Anything else you want to share? Or is that it?
You decided to...
Well, here, tell me something meaningful. Go ahead.
Is it God's fault for creating something that is harmful to us that we know is harmful? If we, for instance...
Yes.
You want to have a discussion?
Well, you asked me a question and I answered it. Yeah.
I wasn't even finished.
Well, when you start off with "Did God create something?" the answer is yes, right?
But
because
I was not finished with my question.
Oh, okay. Let's just
I'll give you an example. All fruits contain sugar. Now, if you decide to eat fruits day in, day out, 4 or 5 times a day, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 pieces of fruit, you could end up being diabetic. Would you agree?
Potentially.
Right. Then is that making God evil, the fruit, or the person itself that chose to eat that amount of fruit?
Well, it depends on what you're asking me. If it's just a matter of whether or not I chose to become a diabetic because I knew the risks inherent with eating fruit 70 times a day, then yeah, I guess that would have been my choice, right?
There you go.
So how does this have to do with God? But the big picture is who gave me the fruit to begin with and who gave me the nature capable of choosing to do such a stupid thing?
Well, if you know right from wrong and you have decided to eat 10, 20, 30 or a certain amount of fruits that is causing you now to be a lifetime diabetic, that is like all your own fault, isn't it?
Sure, yeah, I'd say internally, yeah.
If you go to a store to buy yourself, I don't know, a steak knife, and you decide to harm people with it or an individual, perhaps even yourself, is that the store owners, the factory, or God's, or your own fault?
It's everybody's. I think everyone's responsible on that, Ron. Yeah.
You think everybody's responsible?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, if I lived in a city where they disallowed certain things to be manufactured with plastic, right, and therefore it reduced the amount of plastic pollution in the environment, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, well,
okay,
I
great.
guess.
So then if there's an availability of sugary bullshit snacks on the shelves and distribution channels are responsible for manufacturing them and then distributing them to children, don't you think everyone involved is at fault?
Perhaps replace the knife with a rock. Instead of like cracking open this coconut, you decided to crack somebody's skull with it because he stepped on your brand new Nikes. Is that God's fault for creating the rocks? Or is that your
Yeah, he's
fault
culpable for setting up the parameters within that those things could happen. Yeah, for sure.
So is it God's fault that a person killed somebody with a vicious left hook? That person fell and cracked his skull. Is it in God's fault that I have?
Ultimately, yeah.
So all the evil, sort of unnecessary evil, regarding the vicious attacking of an innocent person, that would still be God's fault.
Ultimately, yeah.
So it's regardless.
Well, look, I don't think God's do anything. So if you're asking me to do an external critique, I would say no, God isn't responsible for anything.
Is he at fault in some sort of way? Because he is the creation of all human beings, all creation, including materials that we can make knives with.
Yeah, if I'm doing an internal critique about your worldview, yes, he is ultimately culpable for all those things, yes.
So then, in your belief, God is inherently evil? Or his creation, perhaps?
I guess if I'm doing an internal critique about your God and how he creates things, because he was perfect, right? Remember, we started off with he was perfect to begin with, and perfection doesn't require anything. No change needed. He decided to change the state of affairs to this. So yeah, he's culpable.
What part would you say God is not evil? Is there an element of God? First and foremost, what is your definition of God?
Whatever you guys tell me it is.
So we define for you what God is?
Yeah, because I don't think God exists. But if you want to tell me that
you don't? Okay.
Yeah, if you want to tell me your God creates things such as universes, and he started as being in a perfect state of being, and then changed that state of affairs to something where he has to react emotionally and be jealous or be punishing or say that the planet needs to be wiped clean with water, that's on him, right? Because he didn't need to do anything.
If I would ask, what is the name of the creature, those huge lizards? They're like sometimes like
Komodo dragons.
Komodo dragons. A Komodo dragon bites his prey and then follows it till it dies from the infection wound, right? They have all these germs and bacteria in their mouth. They don't have to strangle you. But for instance, a cat like tiger, lion, leopard, jaguar, they go for the jugular, right? They crush your windpipe. Would you say like that is in the nature of the creature, or is that the creature that just is what it is, and there's nothing to blame the creature for? Yeah, it's the nature
of the creature, and it is what it is. It's both, yeah.
Would you blame God for that?
I wouldn't blame God for anything as an external critique. Again, internally, I would just say God is responsible for setting up that system where animals do that to one another.
So you would say like animals are evil as well?
As an internal critique based on your worldview, I would not say they're necessarily... Yeah, no shit. I would say that what I see in nature, such as even like African wild hunting dogs ganging up on, other animals and ripping them apart bit by bit, not my cup of tea, but it is what it is.
Would you yourself consider mankind and all the creations of God, because that's what I believe in, would you consider them more good than evil or more evil than good?
Mankind?
Yeah, the human species and all the other creation God has created. Would you consider them as a collective more good than evil, or more evil than good?
I would take more of an amoral stance on it. Like I don't necessarily think that sharks are evil by any means, but the results of what could happen to another creature and its feelings and its pain thresholds, yeah, that could be negative to that animal, and me viewing it, yeah, it's icky to me.
Well, then I got the mother of all questions for you. You ever seen the it's like a quote, whether you're the gazelle or the leopard, right? They both have to run.
Yeah.
Right, because the fastest gazelle has to be faster than the slowest. The fastest leopard has to be faster than the slowest leopard.
Okay.
Right, because one is gonna die. One is gonna die from starvation or his cubs, right? Or the gazelle is gonna end up on a dinner plate. Who do you decide it's evil?
I don't think either are evil. I don't. Evil is a religious term, dude. Like I mean, sure. I think to be honest with you, dude, what I think is the most evil thing in my ultimate position here is the shit that humans do to one another and the stuff that's in the minds of men, right? Like I think that it's evil.
Mankind or men, as in the men.
In human beings, I think what humans think of and do to one another and other creatures is what's evil mostly. Because I'm a human and I can't get away from my own emotional states and investments. And I think that like kidnapping children or raping people or blowing up buildings with innocence in it, I think that's quote unquote evil. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not telling anyone else they have to think the same thing.
Do you feel the same way about animals?
No, I already told you. I think that animals do what they do, and yes, it's icky to me. But I'm not gonna sit there and go, we should go try to modify the behavior of orcas.
You know about the behavior of baboons?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those brawls in between like packs of 800 baboons?
Chimpanzees. Yeah, hell yeah. It's like orangutans are little.
Okay, honestly, I love Sugar Belly when I'm not talking to her. When she's talking to other people, though, like her to Pepe earlier had me in fucking stitches.
I agree. But when she goes in talking about Nigerian culture, sometimes I'm like, is that really true? Is she trying to troll us? Like, she basically said that women kind of hold the reins in everything when it comes to relationships and stuff in Nigeria. That it's all mostly about money, and that there's really no.
He apologized to black artists. He literally stood at the Grammy Awards and apologized for stealing black music for generations and building wealth off of it. He got richer off of stealing black music than little richer than the actual creators that made the music. He was hated by black artists. And do you know what's so cold about it? James Brown talks about this a lot, and Little Richard. They would be on tour singing the music that they fucking wrote, and they would get injunctions from white labels saying, you can't record this music because this music has been copywritten by our label. And it literally would say that, and then they would go to court and they would be told by lawyers, they copyrighted your music. We don't understand how they did it. Because we copyrighted your music first. But guess what? The copyright industry and government was fucking racist. And so they wouldn't even acknowledge the black copyright, the first copyright by those black artists. They only recognized the white artists. So again, black artists didn't get paid because you had the fucking United States government saying, hey, we're only going to recognize the copyright from these white labels and not from these Negro labels.
They know what they doing. So what we have established...
Motherfuckers don't know history.
Blacks got paid.
He's still gonna say it, even though I just explained it in history and showed you how they did get paid. You just gonna reiterate it because you're a retard. At this point, you're a retard.
Blacks still got paid.
They did not get paid, and I just showed you how they get paid.
As much as you don't want to accept the fact that they got paid,
They didn't even get
in
paid.
the manner of which,
You keep saying
in the
y'all
manner
paid, and I
of which
just
you
showed you how
don't
they did
accept
get
this.
paid. You loser.
You loser.
Yeah,
That's what
I
you
just
got to
showed
come
you
up
they
with.
didn't get paid.
Blacks got paid.
With your IQ, are you okay?
Blacks got paid.
How did they get paid? How did they
Blacks
get
got
paid?
paid.
How did they get paid?
Did they get paid when they went on tour?
No, I just showed you that they got injunctions when they.
Oh, they didn't get paid when they.
No, they didn't.
So when Little Richard went on tour, he didn't get paid.
No,
When Little Richard went on tour, did he get paid?
Hold on, bro. He did not get paid.
When he went on tour, he did not get paid.
No, he didn't get paid for his music.
Oh, he did get paid.
No, he didn't. Because he couldn't.
So then when Little Richard went on tour, did he get paid? When Little Richard went on tour, did he get paid?
Goofy. He didn't get paid for the songs he wrote.
When Little Richard went on tour, did he get paid?
Yo, Ford, bro. Stop dang breathing all in the mic, bro. That shit is annoying. You gotta allow him to talk. Yeah, imagine being.
Allow him to talk when he ain't answering the question. How am I gonna press him? But has he explaining? I don't need an explanation. I need a yes or fucking no.
We're not in a court of law, sir. We're not in a court of law.
You gotta make mic on.
Yeah, so
I'm serious, bro. That shit is too loud. You gotta change that up, bro.
when Little Richard would write a song and it would be a hit song, or James Brown would write a song and it would be a hit song. Even Luther Vandross found this, right? And Roberta Flack, all of them went through this. They would write a song and then that song would sell millions of copies because a white artist would go in and re-record it, illegally re-record it. That song would sell millions, right? That white artist would become rich off of that song because the record label would compensate that artist like Pat Boone. They would compensate them very well. But then that same record label would say to Little Richard when he would go on tour, and the audience is coming to see him sing that hit song because they know he wrote it, right? Because like that baby boomer generation and the young silent generation, they were in tuned into black music at that time. So they knew Little Richard wrote that song and he was performing that song before Pat Boone or before Elvis Presley, as an example. Elvis Presley did a lot of that. He would steal from Black Accord the album, sell it, and make millions of dollars off of it, and he got compensated, right? So when Little Richard, whose several songs Little Richard stole from, Elvis Presley stole several songs from Little Richard, and then later on praised Little Richard as his idol, as if that meant anything. Pay that motherfucker his money. But nonetheless, when Little Richard would go on tour to perform those hit songs that that audience showed up for, he couldn't sing it because white record labels would send him an injunction saying, hey, we've copywritten your music and we've copywritten this song. This song doesn't belong to you, therefore you can't perform it. So then now they can't sing their hit songs. So guess what? Hold on.
Nathan,
Listen,
like, because he keeps going on for a long time.
Let him finish, bro.
Yeah, so less and less people started to come to see Little Richard perform because now he can't perform any of his hit songs. So now he can't go on tour. So guess what? He got to go fucking work in a hospital as a bed nurse, turning over shitty white people because he can't go on tour and perform his music. This is what Little Richard went through for decades. And this is why he was broke and poor many times and standing in front of churches, one of them being my church, begging the church for money because he couldn't get paid for his music.
Can't get cold.
And he was
Gotta wear a hat quite often to stay warm. There's a lot of skin here that gets exposed to the elements that keep it packed in. Hair is technically a hat to a bald person.
Bro, that's not the life of it. He should have been, bro. Do you know how much money Little Richard's music has made? Little Richard's music has made billions of dollars. In 1988, they said that Disney had made $600 million off of Little Richard's music. $600 fucking million in the 1980s. This man literally.
And around that time, when you produce artwork, you sold your artwork. And you have people that buy it, and they can do whatever they want to do with that art because they want it from you.
But here's the problem. He didn't get compensated for his artwork. He never got paid for his artwork. He never got paid for his artwork. And the publishing and that he did do, and the publishing that he did, and all that stuff that was supposed to be done, he did. But because of the United States racism, they refused to acknowledge it. They refused to acknowledge his publishing. They refused to acknowledge anything that he put in his imprint or anything that he did. They refused to acknowledge it, and they only acknowledged the white label. So he never got paid for his work until, do you know what happened? Disney was taking him out of money. Do you know how he got paid, Nathan? Because of a man by the name of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, later on in the 1990s, late 90s, because Little Richard was poor and the church was taking care of him, my church particularly, because of that, Michael Jackson had heard about it. Michael Jackson went and bought Little Richard's publishing. And when he bought Little Richard's publishing, he turned Little Richard's publishing over to him. That's how and that wasn't until the fucking 90s when Little Richard got paid.
Okay, can I go now?
He sold it for cheap. So. Right, he gave them with that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hang on, thank you. Hang on. Yes, because that's exactly where I was going to go. He signed a deal with Specialty Records in the 50s. Tutti Frutti came out in 1955, which means Tutti Frutti was made with the resources that the Specialty Records gave him to produce the record. He got paid $50 for the record and half a cent for every record sold. So yeah, you can say it might be underpaid, but guess what? He was paid. And like Nate just said, the life of a struggling artist.
I don't play Fortnite.
That's all it was. So he was paid for the record and he got paid for every record sold. Now, do you want to keep going down this road? Or are you going to stop?
So, generations later, that actually belonged to him. Again, you said he got paid 1.5 cents for every song that was done. However, you're not acknowledging the fact that he did that. Why? Because when Elvis Presley did the song, Elvis Presley's record label copyrighted the song illegally and gave the publishing and gave the performance royalties to who? Elvis fucking Presley. That's why Elvis Presley died super rich, because he had spent generations re-recording songs from black artists, and then his record label would come in and copyright it illegally, but because they were black, they had no recourse in the court system. So that's why. So Little Richard was not only...
Can I respond to that point? Can I respond to that point?
Not only was Little Richard ripped off...
Can I respond to that point?
Contracts. His music was then...
I want to respond to that one point.
Unjustly copied.
Let me respond to that one point.
Which he never was able to get...
Let me respond to that one point. And if you want to use Little Richard and use Elvis, well, guess what? Little Richard, quote himself, said if it wasn't for Elvis singing the song, it helped him make more money. So he thanked Elvis for singing the song because it put more money in his pockets.
Oh.
So, and that's a quote from Little Richard.
So what it is right now?
Okay, so
you just say that Q right now. You were educated by a narrative. You were educated by a narrative on this, but you don't know how art works, bro. I'm gonna explain it again. You, as an artist, you produce art. You sell your art, right? So if I sell you my art, let's say I produce painting of Mona Lisa. I sold that to you. I don't own that art. This is some new conception, bro. Where you sell your art and yet you still own your art. It's like you lease your art.
That's what I'm trying to educate you.
They did sell. No, you're wrong. They did sell their art.
I just showed you how Little Richard, how James Brown, and literally said, no, you're not listening. Little Richard, James Brown, I can name you plenty of other black artists that talked about how white artists would come, white record labels would come and re-record their music and steal their publishing and steal their imprint. And when they went to the courts would not hear it. The courts ignored them because the courts took the side of the white man, the white record labels. So, and they would even use crazy shit like they would use the, what was that law? Damn it, it just slipped my head. They would use the Dred Scott case in order to argue against black artists like Little Richard and James Brown. James Brown literally said that he would write a song and he would do an album and release it. And then white record labels would come in and have nothing but white people re-record that song, and then they would sell it. And he couldn't sue them and get recourse, say, hey, you're singing songs and selling music that I wrote. So he didn't get paid. Literally, Luther Vandross said he would write songs and they would literally give his songs that he didn't get paid for. They would take the songs and give it to white artists to record, and those songs will make tens of millions of dollars, and he never received a check from it. So what are you talking about? They didn't sell their music. And there's generations of that happening.
I think what Nathan is saying is they sold the rights to the music, similar to like a patent. Like there are people, the woman who invented the fidget spinner, she sold the patent to the fidget spinner for a couple $100. And then, thinking like, okay, then inventing is similar to art in that respect, right? Like you don't know if it's going to be a good invention or not. You sell the patent to it. The other company took the patent.
With that, John, you're not listening.
Then what? When you say they took it, what did they take?
Okay, so let me.
Hold on. How about this? Were they under contract?
No, they weren't. So let me give you an example.
That's a lie.
No, hold on. Let me give you an example, right? So I signed to a record label, right? Let's say I signed to.
What did you sign?
Record. I signed in my contract that I'm going to do record and I'm going to write music.
And who owns the music at the end of it?
So hold on, listen. I want you to hear this. So Top Flight is the label that I signed to. Top Flight owns my music. Right? They own the publishing. They own 50% of the publishing. I'm supposed to get X amount of performance royalties and writing royalties. Another label, let's say Columbia Records, decides I write my song, record it, I release it to the public, it's gaining traction, it's blowing up. Columbia Records, right, comes in, Columbia Records listens to my album, they have all white artists sing the song and perform the song, and then Columbia Records releases the album under their imprint. It blows up and makes millions of dollars. I get nothing from it. I'm not under contract to Columbia. So what right does Columbia have to come in, re-record my album, and then turn around and release it under a white imprint and with white artists doing it? At least they're supposed to pay that other record label. But here was the issue. Many of the labels that they signed to were black owned. So when these black record labels would go to court and sue and say, hey, this is our artist, Little Richard's our artist, and they were the original performers and the sole producers and songwriters of said song, we need to get our check. They would not acknowledge them. They'd say, no, we didn't. And what was so cold about it, Columbia Records would use the Dred Scott case to essentially say, hey, you don't have any rights to anything because the Supreme Court said during the Dred Scott case, they were literally using that. And the courts would rule on the side of these white record labels. And so not only did the black record labels not get paid, or even when it was a smaller imprint, and it may have been white, like let's say they were a white owners or a partnership between a black dude and a black person and a white person co-owning the label, they would, if it was a smaller label, they would take the side of the larger white label.
White people again? I'm just glad nobody can accuse me of being the one talking about white people in this room.
So
Shut up. Wait a minute.
No, I'm just saying because
Here's my boo thing, Sugar Belly. That's my boo thing right there, Sugar.
Earlier in this room, the number of people who accused me of talking about white people, I'm just glad that now somebody else in the kind of
They're trying to cape for white supremacy. Get the fuck out of here.
Wait, sorry, did you say I was trying to keep a white supremacy?
No, I'm saying I'm talking about that one. No, not. Yeah, that goofy. They got paid. Nigga, they didn't get paid. That's the point. That's why the laws changed, because the music industry acknowledged they literally said the trillions of dollars that were stolen from black artists over the last 100 years. They calculated somewhere around $2 to $3 trillion were stolen from black artists. And they said, because of that, we have to change the laws. And so the music industry themselves lobbied to have the laws, lobbied to Congress and the Senate to change the laws. It took an act of Congress to change publishing laws in this country. And Congress themselves acknowledged it was due to the fact of racial discrimination of black artists. Well, they said black and brown artists, but it was really black. Ain't nobody checking for no brown music.
What are you saying? Please, like,
most of them brown people stole from them Africans.
Okay, so first of all, what is it? There's fantastic music coming out of India. They didn't steal it from you. India has its own musical form called Carnatic music, which is beautiful. And Pataka Gudi. And Pataka Gudi is one of the greatest Indian songs.
Never heard of it.
I don't care if you've never heard of it. Like, I do not care.
What does that have to do with the music industry in the United States, Sugar?
You said nobody. No, listen. I'm just responding to like the specific line that you said, where you said nobody is checking for brown music. That's that's
talking about Indians when they say black and brown.
I'm not responding to like anything you said about music industry.
No,
I'm just
they're not talking about Indians. When they talk about black and brown in the United States, Sugar Belly, they're not talking about Indians. They're talking about Latino.
Indian people.
Yeah, she just
not in America. No, in America, brown people are Hispanic. Yes, in America. Listen.
Yes.
What about the?
This is the first I'm hearing of Latino people being called brown.
Yeah. So, you didn't know that, Sugar. So let me explain to you, Sugar Belly. In the United States, Indian people are classified as white. They're classified. Yes.
No,
Indian people are. Yes, that is very true. They are classified as white.
How are Wait, hang on. How are Indian people classified as whites in the United States?
They are. So let me explain to you. So let me explain to you how it works. So East Indians, North Africans, until recently, North Africans were classified as white too as well. But North Africans just recently, Sugar Belly, they went to the OMB and they asked the OMB, which funds the census, the OMB, they asked them to change their classification from white to give them their own separate classification of North African. And the OMB listened and said, yes, they will. And so on the next census in 2030 or 32 or something, 2030, North African will be on the census. But for for the last 60 years, for the last 40 years or 30 or 40 years on the census, North Africans were listed as white, the racial category is white.
You didn't even take into account that we're, like you said, you should have stuck to your guns. We're talking about America. I don't know why we're talking about.
Okay, sorry, excuse me, Butcher.
It has nothing to do with what we were talking about.
Okay, Butcher, thank you very much, but I don't need your opinion on what I was saying. Okay, fine. Yes, thank you. So, like, I just let's get back to what I was saying. Whatever. Oh my God, excuse me. Like, nobody was talking in this room but Q. After he finished talking, the room was silent. Okay, so nothing was derailed. Like, unless maybe like the voice in your head where I'm not. Listen, like, could you like shelve your obsession with me for a second? Thank you. I was talking to Q. Like, you're obsessed with me. Like, I get it, but like, I don't have to see it to leave me alone. Leave me alone. I need freedom. Give me free. I'm a Amistad. Leave me alone.
Yeah, go back down and out.
This is Amistad. Like you're oppressing me. I need freedom. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Why are you so obsessed with me? Anyway, what I was saying is that like North Africans have a stronger case of being related to white people than Indians. So I can kind of understand like if North Africans were somehow classified as white, right? At least I can kind of see the connection there. But Indians are Asians, like they're quite far away. Like I don't see how they would classify Indian people as white.
I think in the 1980s they actually in the census in the 1980s they started designating. They made a specific classification for Indians, Southwest Asians. Before 1980, I believe they were been white. They might have been classified as white, but also before the 1980s, I don't think the population of the United States was anything meaningful to sort of like. Again, as far as the census was concerned, it's like white, right? Like we're talking like a very minuscule population. And then starting in the 1980s, they started giving their own designation.
Yeah, and then also the second question is like who is classified as brown,
This is what I'm trying to say.
right?
Now we're talking about the demographics of the African. Northern Africans versus
Nobody was talking
Indians.
to you.
It don't matter.
So Southeast Asian.
Why are you buzzing in on our night
Southeast Asian. Hold on, y'all, because I don't know what y'all talking about.
Why are you buzzing in on our night
Hold on, brother. Let me explain to them. So Southeast Asians, even on the contemporary census, there's no designation for Southeast Asians. They are listed as white. They are expected to put in either Asian, just the regular Asian, or white. But many Southeast Asians identify as white on census. And
Q. So if you're saying that Southeast Asians like have the option of checking Asian, then they're not classified as white. Like, do you understand? So
let me explain to you.
Given the option to
they actually, hold on, let me explain something. What the OMB has shown is that overwhelmingly Southeast Asians do choose to check white. They do choose white.
Okay.
So they check white. Typically.
Wait, but that's two different things happening. So, like, first of all, what you told me was that they were classified as white, right? And now what you're telling me is that, like, they are self-identifying as white.
Yes. No. So let me explain something to you. For most American history, not most American history, in the recent probably 30 or 40 years, Southeast Asians were classified as white. They were. But as they added the Asian category on, it was said that, hey, you can choose that. But by that time, culturally, Southeast Asians here in America have been choosing white. And so they continue to choose as white, just as Arabs, right? Arabs are considered white in America. In fact, Arabs are listed, according to the United States government, as first peoples. They're literally listed as first peoples.
Do you have proof? Can I just ask this one question? Sorry. Do you have proof that Indians are marking Caucasian? Because I'm not finding anything that says that they're even doing that. So do you have like an article or a link?
No, I never.
Wait, hold on, Q.
I'm going by what the OMB said.
The OMB. Is it listed as first peoples of where? Like,
literally the United States government calls.
Why would Arabs be classified?
Arabs, I don't know, but the United States government calls Arabs first peoples, basically of the world, meaning they were the first people. Yes, the United States government.
That sounds very far-fetched to me.
No, it's not. I'm telling you it is, love. I'm telling you it is.
I'm looking at an actual census form from the 1980s. And again, I don't know about whether they could self-identify as white as well, but at least if you did check Asian, under Asian, of course, there are subcategories. They include Asian, Chinese, Filipino, Japanese. I won't read all of them. Asian Indian is one of the options. And then they have a whole thing for Pacific Islanders, Polynesian, Hawaiian, et cetera, et cetera. That's that's a 1980 census. Maybe under white, if you had checked white, there would have also been options of Irish, English, and maybe they would have had Indian American there as well. But then you're not talking about the government trying to tell them how they identify. It's do I consider myself Indian, Asian Indian because I consider myself an Indian who is from Asia, or I guess you're saying that some of them I self-identify as white Indians?
Because
that is a little strange to me. I kind of find that hard to believe, especially in the 1980s. Especially in the 1980s.
Well,
we have a
bro, I'm fine example. Nikki Haley identifies as white.
Because wait, Q,
she is half white, I believe.
No, she's not. Both her parents are Indian.
Sorry, what's that beating me? Like, what is wrong with you?
Sorry, I just gotta ask this question to Q. How is it not a derivative? This is the Q. How is it not a derivative when all you said was black and brown? Now all of a sudden we talking about the demographic.
Yeah, brown in the United States was never. Let me just say this: brown was never included Indians. When they said black and brown, it was exclusive to Latinos, not Indians. Indians in that.
Because even in the census, even if you're talking about they, like you're saying, they never. I mean. Brown is not in the census at all, so it's not a government thing. The government doesn't call people brown. You're talking about colloquially. You're talking about colloquially.
I'm not talking about the census. What are you doing?
You're the one that brought it up.
Yeah, I was talking about something.
You were trying to educate Sugar Belly about the phrase brown in the U.S. does typically refer to Latin Americans, and yes, it does. But it can be broader than that. It's colloquial. We're talking about colloquialisms here.
Yes, colloquial.
Right, and colloquially speaking, brown refers to not just Latin Americans.
No, sir. Hold on. In the United States of America, colloquially speaking and politically speaking, hold on, brother. Politically speaking, in the United States of America, when they say black and brown, Southeast Asians are not included in that. It's exclusive. I'm talking about in the political sphere, when the term black and brown is used, they're not including Southeast Asians in that. They're exclusively including Latin America. That's it.
Okay, so this was where my confusion came in, because what I know as demographically brown is Indian people, right?
In the UK, that's probably more accurate. Brown means that. It means the UK.
Yeah, when you say brown, it's in India.
Yeah, in the UK, that is definitely a fact. In the UK.
Holies.
Okay, sorry, excuse me, Mr. America, sexual person, okay?
Hold on. Knowledge. You know Alan. You know what Alan does.
I was exclusively speaking about the term black and brown.
Yeah,
black and brown.
I know, and that's why I was asking for clarification, because what I knew the term brown as was Indian people, so I was surprised that not only were you saying, because what I thought you were saying was that, okay, fine, brown refers to Indians, but it includes Latinos, right? Or it includes Hispanic people. What I didn't understand was that you were explicitly excluding Indians from that category.
Why would you be talking about?
But in America, they are excluded. They're not included.
I wouldn't necessarily say that they are excluded.
You have Chicanos, right? Chicanos that talk about brown pride.
Okay, so what Dewey just said is exactly my point. I know
he's talking about Indian people when he's literally talking about black Americans whose money's been stolen from white Americans in America.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. Okay, I know.
My bad, name mod. I apologize.
Excuse me, I know multiple Indian Americans, right?
Hey, I didn't mean to disrespect you. My bad. I apologize.
Sorry, I know multiple Americans.
I know an attention-seeking tactic when I see one. That's all.
God, please. I mean, get psychiatric help. This cannot continue. But what is it? I know multiple Indian Americans who refer to themselves as brown, right? And so that's the reason why I was surprised that you were saying in America Indians are excluded from brown. I thought
for the most part they are.
I would disagree that for the most part they are.
No, you can't disagree. I'll give you an example. When Chicanos, as an example, talk about brown pride, they're not talking about Southeast Asians.
Sure, they might not be, but I know East Asians who refer to brown and they're thinking of including themselves in that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you may know that, but in America, I'm talking about.
I am in America.
Okay, I'm telling you, in the American political sphere, Southeast Asians typically are not included in the title of being brown. It's almost exclusively when it comes to Hispanics and Latinos. And when Latinos talk about brown pride, they're not thinking about Southeast Asians. They're not even, and I'm just going to be real with you. To most so-called minorities, Southeast Asians are in close proximity to whiteness. Like when we look at Vivek Ramaswamy, especially in Black America, we look at Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley and them, we just see them as white or white proximity.
But those people are not the only Southeast Asians.
We don't see them as having any kind of solidarity with us as minorities or people of color. We don't even engage them as terms of people of color. We don't even see them as people.
Who's we?
Like, I think
and you're being myopic.
Black America.
I think you're speaking for yourself.
No, I think I'm speaking for Black America. And generally, culturally speaking, how Black Americans see it.
The representative for Black America.
Seriously, Iowa, seriously.
I know my culture and I know my people.
And I know everybody.
Okay, excuse me, but Q, like what is confusing about what you're saying, right, is that people like Vivek, right, and Nikki Haley are not the only Southeast Asians. So, for instance, what is it called? Vietnamese people are Southeast Asians. Indonesians, I think. Cambodian people, right? Hmong people. These people are Southeast Asians, and I don't think anybody in America classifies these people as whites.
Nor is there like this will sound racist when I say it, and that's why part of the reason why we don't talk about in the political sphere of the yellow people. We don't say like this is for yellow people. Like that's not a thing because they are encompassed under brown usually.
No, you're right.
I knew knowledge.
You're not seen as white, no, but they're seen, especially Asians, particularly like Japanese, Chinese, even like Indians. They are seen as the so-called model minority in close proximity to whiteness. So as an example, Black America wouldn't look at Chinese or Japanese or Indians as being in solidarity or people of color. They consider them, you're in close proximity to whiteness, you're the model minority.
I mean, I can see that because like I've definitely encountered that sentiment from like Black people before, but I honestly don't understand the logic of collapsing them into whites because in a way that is kind of erasing like whatever struggles that they have with white people. And I think that's not like.
Well, they gaslight us and tell us they don't have any problems. Remember, Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley are telling Black Americans that they don't have a problem with white Americans. They don't have any issue and that racism doesn't exist. And if they became president, especially Vivek said, if I became president of the United States, I'd get rid of Juneteenth. So, I mean, they're the ones saying it's not us. They're the ones
that you say they, you're talking about one person as if they now are representing the entire Indian population.
In our interactions with Indians, we find that they have a great deal of anti-Blackness in their culture, and they express it. That's what the movie Mississippi Masala was about, starring Denzel Washington. It was literally chronicling the anti-Blackness that Black Americans had experienced when dealing with Indians.
So I'm not saying that you don't have these experiences with them, but I think the part that is weird, right, is that you're taking what like a handful of people are saying, and it's almost as though what the many more people from those communities say that they have as problems, you're kind of erasing it, right? Because if you go into like Asian circles, for instance, you will hear them talk about like their own racial struggles, like, you know. So are you like, and it's like, it's almost as though you're willing to just pretend that like they don't have these racial struggles just because they also have racial struggles with you?
Well, no, we go by the fact that they identify and they play in model minority politics. So that's what we're going by, right? They say themselves.
We don't have to answer that question.
They are the model minority. They engage in that, right? They've made it very clear for generations in America. Many of the leaders of their organizations have stated that we do not care about the Negro or their issues or their problems. That has nothing to do with us. Just like LULAC, the Hispanics and LULAC 50 years ago said the same thing. Their organization leaders have said the same thing. And again, I think when Indians are given political power and when they're in the public square, they do not take solidarity with us in any way. They don't ally with us in any way. They typically ally with the far right. And so we're only going by what we experience when dealing with them, and then what comes out of their mouths in the political sphere.
What is your question?
There's no question. He just wanted to do some anti-Indian bigotry.
It's not anti-Indian, it's a fact. Hold on, nothing that I said, nice try, asshole. Nothing that I said was anti-Indian. Hold on, even literally what I said, Indian activists and Indian leaders would even say he's right about. They would even deny it. Just let him rant. In fact, Hassan, the comedian, who's also very much Indian American, born and raised in Sacramento, California, he himself, right? He's a comedian, but he engages in politics, and he's very much a part of his community. He himself acknowledged and has called out the anti-blackness in his own community. And he himself has said that Indian Americans have shown little solidarity with Black America. So
his point is that he thinks Indians hate Black people.
So my point is, even in the Indian community, they speak about this and they acknowledge.
You're right.
it.
Indians are racist and they hate Black people. You're right.
Well, they're anti-Black, yes.
Yes, they're all Indians. All of the Indians, even the ones that might be trying to do good, they are actually racist bigots. That's a very good point.
Straw man argument. That is a straw man argument.
That's what you've just been saying for the last 20 minutes.
I never said all.
Oh, not all. Hashtag not all.
I said in the Indian community.
Hashtag not all. In the Indian community, not all community.
Yes.
Hashtag not all. But if we're going to talk about Indians, let's talk about how racist they are. Hashtag not all.
Hold on. They acknowledge the anti-Blackness that exists in their community.
But do they acknowledge hashtag not all?
And of course, in the political sphere, you can't help but to say it because Indians have expressed anti-Blackness in the political sphere. I use Nikki Haley, and the most prominent Indians, right, in politics have shown anti-Blackness.
So my takeaway is correct. The point you're making is that Indians are anti-Black.
I'm gonna name them.
But hashtag not all. So it wasn't really a straw man.
Hold on. Indians in elite positions in politics are
anti-Black. We get it.
I'll explain anti-Blackness. That being
you don't need to explain it. We get it. You think that they are anti-Black.
Bobby Jindal, and as well as the lady, I just forgot her name because you keep ad-libbing, and also Kamala Harris have all shown anti-Blackness towards Black Americans. Yes, they have. So,
okay, Indians are anti-Black according to you.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Then it wasn't a straw man. I did not do a straw man that you just agreed with me.
Let me finish.
You've been ranting about this for 15 minutes.
Let me clarify. In their community, it's anti-Blackness. Not all Indians are anti-Black.
Great. That's very big of you.
In their community, anti-Blackness is quite common. And that's according to their leaders. Even their leaders acknowledge that anti-Blackness is quite common in the Indian community.
Okay, so again, my point stands that your point, which is not a straw man, is that Indians are anti-Black. Hashtag not all. I get that. In the Indian community, they're anti-Black.
That's racist.
So, I have a question. So, even if Indians are anti-Black,
why
would that change?
Okay, first of all, why are all these people being so racist?
Wait,
I have no idea.
Sorry, I was asking something.
Well, no, I'm talking about you. You're being racist.
Wait,
no, I'm not. I'm pointing out that he's making a generalization about the Indian community.
Wait,
I think that makes you smart. It just shows what a low IQ you have.
Knowledge, stay the fuck out of it.
Trolling Black people just shows you have a low IQ.
If you want to, can I also ask a question, please? So, even if, let's say, Indians are anti-Black, right? How does that erase whatever Indians themselves may be experiencing with other groups of people, such as white people? So, like, let's say there's some sort of racial issue happening between white people and Indians, and then the Indians themselves turn around to be anti-Black to Black people. Is it like, you're not acknowledging that, like, these two things could be true? Do you get? So Indians could be experiencing, like, racial discrimination from white people, and Indians themselves could also be racially discriminating against Black people.
That's right. That's right.
So we haven't been privy to that until recently, right?
Wait, who's we? Who's we? Who's we?
So Black America, we haven't been privy to these conversations that these Indians supposedly are having about their issues with white people and how white people treat them. We haven't been privy to that until recently, right? We've seen what is her name? The Republican that told Vivek Ramaswamy that she wouldn't vote for him because he's Indian. And we had a good old laugh. Black America did, because we were like, oh, look, told you so. Because in the public school, in politics, whenever we see Indians, they're always siding with the far right. And so they're always telling Black Americans in politics that racism doesn't exist, that it's a figment of our imagination, right? And how they came to America, or their parents came to America as immigrants, and they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and now they're successful. They're more successful than we are. This is what the type of model minority politic that Indian Americans have engaged in for decades now. And just recently, we've seen them get their wake-up call by the same people that they were associating themselves with, the far right, literally telling them, we're not going to vote for you because you're Indian. White people walking up to Vivek Ramaswamy and shaking his hand, saying, hey, I love everything that you say, buddy, but I can't vote for you because you're not an American.
Right now, you're being racist.
It's like, I was born in America, and they're like, yeah, but you're not an American.
I like how I asked if he spoke for the Black community, and he does, and now he's also speaking for the Indian community. He knows the Indian community, and he knows how they feel.
Absolutely. And I can assure you, Mr. White Man, that the vast majority of Black Americans would agree with me. I can almost bet my
And do you think that the vast majority of Indians would agree with you? Because you're speaking on behalf of them.
Absolutely. Behind closed doors, they probably would.
Oh, okay. So behind closed doors, so you're reading their minds. Do you think that they would say it publicly, or are you just reading their minds now? You're reading the minds of the Indian Americans.
I can tell you this. Some of their leadership. You're deciding who their leaders are.
Do you know who their leaders are?
I'm telling you, some of their leadership would probably say yes. Well, Indian Americans, and they.
So you speak for the Black community and you speak for Indian Americans.
No, I'm telling you what I have heard in the Indian community.
Oh, you're telling me what you've heard. You have heard as a Black representative. You've heard from the Indian representatives.
Listen. Once again, white man. You don't get any points trolling Black people.
I'm not trolling.
Low IQ. You're just low IQ. That's all.
I'm not low IQ. My son has a higher IQ than you.
You think that you're funny and you're ironic.
I have not landed one joke, nor have I tried.
I'm making this nigger.
Whoa! Is that what you think? That's a straw man. You want to talk about straw man? You want to talk about straw man?
You're literally turning a conversation that people are attempting to engage in into trying to turn it into a comedy act. It doesn't work.
Who is trying to turn shit? You're straw manning now.
It doesn't work. Colonizer. It doesn't work.
Like I don't want this thing to hell. Okay. So let's try to get back on track. So cute. Look at what you said, right? And you're like, oh, like these Indians, they're allying with like far right people or whatever it is. So there's something that I think that some Black Americans do, and some is underlined. It's not everybody, right? That has always confused me, and it is this idea that conservatism is anti-Blackness. I think that it fails to take into account the fact that most cultures around the world are highly conservative. And so when people from those types of cultures come to America, the political grouping that I guess makes them feel most like comfortable or that they're most familiar with is actually the right. It's not the left. And so there's always been this weird thing of like, oh, you're conservative, oh, you believe in like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you believe in this, you believe in that, blah, blah, blah. And so that means that you're anti-Black or that you support white supremacy. And I don't think that you understand that like this is almost the default position of almost everyone around the world, regardless of whether or not they're white or they're some other color of people. It's not about whiteness versus Blackness. It's about the fact that most people are conservative, right? And I also think it's the reason why, like, sometimes you guys don't get along with Africans, because Africans come into America, and then because you've already kind of told yourself that to be conservative is to be anti-Black, you then become surprised when you find out that the Africans are mostly conservative too, because you now think, oh, they're sucking up to white people or they're sucking up to whiteness. But what you're not realizing is that like they're just being their normal selves, right? Like that would always have been their position. And so I think that you need to decouple this idea that like being conservative is automatically anti-Black. It's not really the case, but like for some reason, a lot of Americans think that that's the case.
Yeah, so Sugar Belly, you obviously don't know Black Americans because you're not part of our culture. So Black Americans don't view conservatism as anti-Black in the sense
I said some, and I also said some was underlined.
Okay, some. Okay, well, perhaps, I don't know, some. But for the most part, Black Americans are culturally conservative, right? We're economically liberal, right? Because of how we've had to engage power in this country. We've had to use the power of government, the power of the pen. But culturally, Black Americans tend to be conservative. However, when you talk about the conservative movement and the conservative parties, they have been anti-Black. They have been very racist movements. They have been predicated on the notion of anti-Blackness. The whole, what is it? Damn it. Oh, fuck, I forgot what it's called, but I forgot what it's called, was created by conservatives and is created by conservative, particularly Republicans, and Democrats picked it up, benign and neglect. And the what is it called? Damn it, I forgot the name of it. But
benign neglect was a term during the Revolutionary period. It first started to describe the relationship between the colonies and King George. Then benign neglect, they later got incorporated into the Republican movement in the very late 1840s. So we're talking about 1848 to like 1851 before the party developed itself. And then in 1851, when the party developed, to the discussion of benign neglect over free and enslaved states and over the
Southern strategy. And then the Southern strategy was created, which then funneled down, which then benign neglect was reintroduced. Do not offer them anything, be very vague, use terms like people of color. That came from Republicans, and Democrats picked it up. Democrats, Dixiecrats in the Republican Party picked it up, and even liberals, white liberals and Black liberals later on began to practice benign neglect against Black Americans. So,
in all fairness,
my point of bringing that up is, my point in bringing that up was, yes, great, you know the history of it, but the point in the United States of why it's been traditionally used was to be weaponized against us. And so my point of saying that is that we're not going by somebody because they have conservative values. We're going by the anti-Black rhetoric that people engage in that identify with the far right. So when we talk about people, minorities that come to this country or immigrate to this country, it's a difference between you saying, hey, look, I worked hard, I pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I'm successful now. Great, that's wonderful for you. But when you say, I came here to this country, I worked hard, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, so you Black Americans are lazy and you make excuses for your failure, and there's no racism, and racism hasn't set you back. Now you're engaging in anti-Black American rhetoric, and you're engaging in the erasure of the facts and history of this country, and you're weaponizing your status against us. Now that's what we push back on. That's what we have a problem with. So when Africans come to this country and they say, particularly